Well, I think we're live. Welcome, everyone. We are on pre-show. I'm going to give it a few minutes. I know we usually start about this time, but let me just check I'm on quiet everywhere. That's on pause. That's not. So we are on pre-show. We got stacks to talk about today, so I can't wait to discuss a few things with you. But I am going to pop over in a minute and just see who's here. But before we do that, let's do the usual unbottling of the golden nectar. I noticed Gerald said he's going to share one with me shortly. You know what? I've only got 2 more of these to go, and then I'm in the US with you guys. So hopefully I can share a few beers with you. I'm dying to try some of the American beer as well, though. So hopefully that's what I'll be trying, because I love when I travel trying all the local brews out. So I'm sure that I'll be going through a few of these in the coming weeks. So remember, we're there from for 4 weeks from the 10th of Feb. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you all over there. Can't wait. We have put a timeline down in the photography videography school. So if you are interested in meeting up with us and things like that, we will be doing meetups. No cost or anything. We're just going to have some fun all together. Join the photography videography school, and then you'll see the meetup sort of located there. We've got a whole timeline now of where we're going to be. So cheers, everyone. So let's just see who's in on the chat. Like I said, we are in pre-show. Guys, if you don't want to watch the pre-show, I will put a timeline down below so you will be able to skip to the stories that you want to see. Well, if you're here for the live show, you can't do that, so too bad. So let's see who's in here at the moment. So Carl's here. What does that mean, Carl? Birth, life, death, infinity. That's very deep. Gerald's here as well. G'day. Casper is as well. George said, mild winter weather, greeting from New Jersey, waiting to see what comes first. The Sony a7siii or winter snow. Interesting, George. Carl said, in upstate Western New York, state visiting relatives. Hello, David and friends. G'day, Carl. Torben's also here. G'day, Torben. 9 Coronas? What do you mean? I'm not going to drink 9 Coronas. Carl, I've got to work this afternoon. Photomix here as well. G'day, Ike. Like Gerald's just said, he will hoist one of those in a few weeks' time in Los Angeles, mate. Can't wait. I'm looking forward to meeting up with you too, Gerald. Gerald has been amazing. Gerald has been organising nearly all of my trip for me, and Gerald's taking me to all places like the desert and up to Yosemite and also to San Francisco and places like that. We've already booked Alcatraz. So we can't wait to meet you all. So we're sort of having a road trip, and Gerald's been amazing. So thank you so much, Gerald, for all you're doing for Kerry and myself. Stan said the XT4 looking like it's about to take over. I'm going to talk about that in one of the stories today, Stan. Greetings from India. This is Bichu Pan, is it? I can't pronounce that properly. Nick said hello to all. Chris said nice weather in Los Angeles today. Good day for a Corona. Exactly. Cheers. What's that? Oh, Carl said he's here. Yes, I am. Ryan said, looks good, sounds good. Thank you, Ryan. G'day, Aaron. Hope you're okay. Only 6 quakes today. It's not stopping, is it, for you? It's terrible. We haven't been able to do the behind the photo show due to the fact that Aaron is having all these earthquakes and issues and things like that. So hopefully we can get that back up and running soon. It might be that it doesn't start again until we're back from the US. We'll just have to see. But Aaron is meeting us in Vegas for WPPI, so hopefully we'll be able to do a live from there somewhere. Oh, let me come back. I can't believe you've had 6 shakes. Oh, it's amazing. Aerial Photos saying g'day. Langston's also here. G'day, Langston. Tatung is also here. Mark said, what's cooking? Nothing at the moment, Mark. Nike Pixel TV says, hope you're doing well. I'm doing very, very well. Thank you. I've just had a stack of things burnt on my head, though, again. Look, this is the problem with being in Australia. We have that high sun damage on our skin. I've got them all on my head as well. I went to the doctor the other day and they used dry ice and burnt them all. So I've got a stack of them. I've got to go back in another week and get some more done. Jim, g'day Jim, good to see you in here as well. Richard said hi David. Victor said hello David and welcome guests. Barry said, good afternoon, David. G'day, Barry. Atilia says, hello, everyone. Does anyone know how fast the Sony a9 II writes to the SD card? Found that the A7R4 is about 200 megabits per second. Yeah, I don't know what the speed is. Someone may be able to say. I'm sure in the specs it's probably listed, Atilia. It should be faster, though. Well, we'll have to see. I'm not sure whether the process is any different than what's in the A7R4. Bill said, I'm having a Blue Moon pumpkin ale. Is that an American beer, Bill? Just curious what that is. Like I said, I'm dying to try the US beers out. Let me know, too, in the comments what you love. I mean, I'm dying to try a few different ones. Hopefully, I can have some of the more specialised beers as well. I love that. MJ said, cheers. Ryan said, hi, David from Vegas. Hope you're going to meet up with us, Ryan, if you're still there in Vegas in a few weeks. Adventure Photo says, cheers and hello from Vail, Colorado. Leslie says, hi, David, what's new? Not much, Leslie. I'm just planning for my trip, really. And also planning this workshop, which I'll talk about shortly with you. Ken said, greetings. Jim says, all as you arrive, give it a thumbs up or show what kind of person you are with a thumbs down. I love it. The funny thing is, thumbs down do still count in your numbers. So in a way, getting thumbs down even helps. I think the people giving thumbs down don't realise that it does help your actual numbers, which is funny. Mike saying hello from Jersey. Carl saying Ben Casey, not sure what that meant. George said, is that a beer or what? George said, beginning to think that we'll never see the A7S III or an A7000. I'm waiting for Nikon's D400. That's what made me jump to Sony in the first place. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in the first story, actually, some of these things that are happening. Terrace says, good evening from Cali. Are you meeting up with us, Terrace, when we come there? Langston says, Carl Ryan hitting us up with deep thoughts today. Mike said, hello from Austin. I tell you, someone already gave a thumbs down. Oh, yeah, we have too. Yeah, like I said, it doesn't matter. They all go in the analytics anyway. Nick said, you're on top chat versus live chat. What does that mean? I don't even know what that means, Nick. Jim said, kudos to Gerald. Yeah, Gerald has done an amazing job, and I can't thank him enough. Vodomiak said, which one do you think is going to be able to do 4K 60 first? Is that PlayStation 5 or the A7S III? Ike, behave yourself. That's quite funny. Where were we? I hate it when it jumps like that. Oh, there we go. Kevin saying hello as well. Langston says, I love my last laugh out loud. Photomiyaki, I know, he's being naughty. Gerald said, my pleasure to be your guide in the Western USA. Yeah, thank you, Gerald. Mr. Marcus said, hello from the UK. You aren't sort of having a road trip. You're driving 500 plus miles and less flying between some cities. No, we're not flying at all. We're just driving. Greetings, coffee dudes. Hero said, Langston said, Sony Entertainment Division looking at the camera department with serious side eye. At this stage, anything's possible. Photomix said, Long Rider, g'day, mate. David, I'm glad you don't do Sony Sausage Festa. We need We need to light a fire under their butts. What does that mean, Long Rider? What's the Sony Sausage Festa? What does that mean? I love it. I love it, though. I love the comment. That's quite funny. Hello, everyone. Hope you're well. Langston said, why do people show off stuff they shoot on a Panasonic or on TVs? I can't wait to get to Vegas with you guys. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to meeting up with you, Aaron. G'day, bloke. Anthony said, I love it. I know this conversation has happened in some breakdown on a Sony campus somewhere. I'm not sure what you guys are talking about. I'm almost buying the Blackmagic pocket camera 6K. I know they are. Sony are taking a while. I'm going to talk about that as the first story. It will be way more than 500 miles by the time we are done. Check out the places listed in the group. MJ said, US policy challenged people need hats. Oh, yeah, I know. We do. Exactly, I do. I wear a hat all the time, though, but this is damage from when I was a kid. Yusuf says, hi. John says, what's up? Guy with the camera said, g'day. I'm trying to get through these so we can start the show. Nivak said, I last did Cali, Oregon road trip. I put on 1,400 miles in the car and got a glare when I returned it. Yeah, we'll be doing a few Ks, I'd say. Lots of micro brews in San Francisco. Lovely. Rolling Rock Beer is amazing. Where's that one from? Rolling Rock Beer. Geez, there's some funny names. What will be coming first, A7000 or the A7S? I'll talk about that soon. Cars are for driving. Altric's here as well. G'day, Altric. MJ says, nice pin-up shoot. I'm going to show that in a minute, MJ, just because that's the workshop that I'm doing. Photomeg said, the GH5 is still the best all-round camera for video. That is still an amazing camera. I agree, Ike. Made for a live one again. Hi from Adelaide. G'day, mate. Ike is right. Jean says, hello. I might have missed it, but have you tried the Tamron 17 to 28? Yes. Oh, yes, I certainly have. Harry said, hello from Indiana. That's a great lens. I'm hoping to get the Tamron 20mm to take to the US with me. It just depends on whether Tamron Australia get them on time. But I am hoping to have that to take away to the US with me. And a few other things, hopefully. Bill said, the Blue Moon Pumpkin Ale is awesome, but out of season now. I bought it. So they go out of season, do they? I suppose they get sold. Syed said, just like your video, don't understand the hate. Haters are always going to hate, Syed. What else? Let me just scroll down. Stan said, hey, David, you're about to start soon, or do you have a minute to use the restroom? No, you can, if you're quick, Stan, but we're going to start in a minute. Yes, we are going to start in a second. I might have to go to the restroom too if I have much more of this beer. And that's about it, I think, because we're just about to start. Okay, so let's go on and start the show, guys.
If you're looking for some crazy, I'll tell you everybody's standing in a line for the water slide. You can come on over, we can take the roller coaster. And you know everybody's looking for a ride in the water slide. Water slide.
Well, welcome everyone for our usual Friday show. Well, it's Thursday US time and everything else. Let me just mark here. I just want to put down to make sure we can skip back to the chat whenever we need it. How is everyone? Just a shout out to say we've only got another 2 of these to go now after today, and then we'll be in the US. So there's 2 more to go. So we will have those next week and the week after. After that, we might still do it, but it'll be traveling through the US. So we're not sure whether we'll have Wi-Fi or whatever where we end up. But hopefully we'll be able to still do the show live. But it'll just be coming from the US. We might be able to find somewhere that has Wi-Fi that we can do it. Just a couple of things before we actually start. I am doing a workshop. Let me just move this down because I want to show you a couple of these images, and then I'll talk about the workshop. Open. Let me just reduce this down and move it over. So this workshop, we're going to be doing a pin-up workshop. Let me just reduce it down so you can see it enough. So we're going to be doing a pin-up workshop at the end of March. It's March the 29th. So if you are in Melbourne, please join us. I'm only offering 8 spots. 4 have already gone. I started to post it yesterday in the photography videography school and everything else. And this is with the lovely Rebecca. This is an actual restaurant that we're going to be showing you. They're closing the restaurant for the afternoon for us. So we're going to have 3 hours where we're going to be able to shoot Rebecca dressed up as a pin-up shoot. So it's going to be a pin-up type shoot. This restaurant is amazing. Stay tuned for when I post the video to sort of advertise it. That'll come up fairly soon. But this is the lovely Rebecca. She is amazing. Can I just go next? No, I have to open up this, I think. This is the next image. If we look at this one, This was another one where I've shot through the window that you can see here as well. Let me just move that over so that I can show you that. So this is another one we'll be shooting through the window. We have lovely props. This shop is set up beautifully. I mean, it does have gorgeous surroundings and things like that. So that's the next one, and I'll show you the last image so that you can see the last one. Now, the whole shop is like this. There's many more that I'm going to be showing you. Let me just move that, just check how that looks. This is another one that we are going to be doing as well. So there's multiple positions that we can shoot in this shop. I'm going to be doing things like showing you how to obviously pose, and Rebecca will be sort of taking you through that as well. I'll be using 3 different lighting: off-camera flash, natural light, and also continuous light, and talking about the differences and why you would use one over the other. We'll also be doing like that reflection shoot that you can see through here, talking about how we expose for glass and how we light that scenario, and I'll be taking you all through that. But the whole shop is basically built like this. It's very, very authentic, so stay tuned. So it's if you want something different in your portfolio, this is going to be amazing, because it really does look really different to a normal shoot that you may do. And we've been given the restaurant to use for the afternoon, which is also amazing. We're going to have hamburgers cooked for us and chips, things like that as well. Greg's just said he's very excited about your workshop. Greg's doing it. He's one of the people that are in it now. So the 4 places have gone. A few people have answered and said they're interesting. I've sent the information off, but basically it's first in, best dressed. So if you do want to make sure that you can get one of the 8 spots, I'll leave the link down below to contact me, and you can contact me that way and I'll get back to you. Like I said, there is 4 more spots available. It's for March the 29th on a Sunday afternoon. Now, we had to do Sunday afternoon due to the fact that we had to have the restaurant closed. We couldn't have people in there while we're doing the shoot, because we're going to basically take over the whole restaurant. So stay tuned for that. So that's really the only advertising that I wanted to show about that. All right, so let's get stuck into some stories today, because we have a bit to cover today. Let me just move this back up here. So the first story, let me put down the time. What are we on? 17:35. So this is going to be interesting, and I'm not sure how a few of you are going to take it, but this is an interesting statement that Sony Alpha Room has posted this morning, actually. Well, morning for me. But they've now said that Fuji, Nikon, Panasonic, Canon are now pressing hard on mirrorless. Sony, it's time to speed up the innovation pace again. And they've put a question mark. So they're saying, is it time that Sony have to basically start to push the innovation again? And let's just look at this document before I really discuss this with you. And they're saying here that many Sony readers have complained that no Sony APS-C camera was able to match the performance and usability of the Fuji X-T3. And just in 1 month now, we're going to get the new X-T4 with IBIS 2. And I'll just come over to here, and they're saying here that IBIS was the only thing really that the A6600 had that Fuji couldn't match. So that was really the thing that was missing from, say, the A6600 was the IBIS. Now, if you look at the rumor that's there for the X-T3, they're sort of saying that it's going to be shipping in March, so it's going to be announced soon. They were saying it's not going to be announced in January, but later, so they're saying in March. But they are saying that this is going to have IBIS now built into it. And they're also saying, and this is the interesting part, that the rumors that were coming out were saying it's going to have 6K 60p and anamorphic video as well, and all the rest comes from our source in the Fuji X-T3 group. So this is really interesting. So again, it looks like the the X-T3 was spec'd, apart from the IBIS, I think really blew Sony out of the water if you're dealing with video specs particularly. Stills, not so much, but on the video side of things, it definitely blew Sony out of the water due to the video codecs and everything, bit rates and everything else that the Fuji had. Well, it looks like the X-T4 is going to push that one step further and have IBIS now. And that was the only thing I said at the time. It's a pity that they didn't have IBIS. But I think the IBIS was deliberately left out to enable them to have that in the XT4. And then it may be that they are going to put 4K 60 in there, which would be incredible, or 6K they're saying, which would be incredible. So let's keep going with this. At the same time, Nikon and Panasonic are taking the lead in the video area by offering features not currently any Sony full-frame camera has. And they're saying that, and last but not least, Canon is finally catching up from their past mistakes, and the EOS-R high-resolution camera will be announced soon. I'm going to talk about the Canon as a separate story, so I'm not going to go too much on the Canon at the moment, but it's clear that Canon now are starting to wake up, I believe, and they're going to announce some pretty good cameras coming this year. And they're saying down here that the message is clear. Don't become what Canon and Nikon have been in the past. Now, I think Canon and Nikon have definitely woke up, but I'll talk about this in a summary in a minute. But they're saying don't be what Canon and Nikon have been in the past. Conservative leaders trying to slow down the pace of innovation. At the moment, your sensor and autofocus performance still leads, and it does. I mean, you have no better dynamic range and no better AF than what Sony has currently, and we all know that's true. Even in video, they are leaders in AF, particularly. They're definitely leaders in AF, and I think the dynamic range is still probably the best that's out there, or very close anyway. The IAF performance of the Fuji, Canon, Nikon cameras is already very close, and it has been. With the latest updates, the AF performance has got now very close, and particularly the latest Canon update has improved it a lot. It still doesn't match what Sony has, but it's only a matter of time until they probably become on par now with the way the technology is moving. So, you know, I think that's probably what's going to happen in the future. Sony's performance on future models or via firmware updates, either saying expected to match it. So my call is this: after 7 years of constant evolution, we need, this is what they're saying in here, expand the range with new cameras. XT3 like cameras, well, obviously now they're going to have to compete with an XT4, so it's now moved up a step further. A radical usability changes and features, and like I said, I'll summarize this in a minute. New generation of sensors like the Foveon, sensors, global shutter, and so forth. New fascinating radical ideas like curved sensors, large format mirrorless cameras that do outperform the Fuji GFX system, and so forth. So let's have a discussion on this, because it's really interesting. So, and I'll talk about the a7siii in the next story, but it's clear at the moment that I think if you're talking about stills, Sony are easily up there with anyone at the moment. Now, I know a lot of you always carry on when I mention video, but remember the whole market is moving more towards a fusion type market, where if you look at people that use mobile phones, if you look at the young people that are coming out, most of what they shoot is video. You've only got to look at how they integrate Instagram with video and also stills. They're sharing on Facebook with video and stills. So for the future, it's definitely to the point where fusion, particularly or hybrid cameras, are going to become more and more important. Now, remember, I've discussed this with you before, that a lot of photographers have blinkers on, and all they say is, why do we have to pay for video features? But the point is, we're going to have to move that way in the future. If you think that you can just shoot photography in the next 5 to 10 years, I can tell you that is going to you'll be out of business. If you don't learn video and have the ability to shoot video and stills at the same time, you're definitely going to be out of business, because that's where the market's going to go in the future. I can almost guarantee that. Since I started offering fusion, which is adding video and stills at the same time, that certainly has helped my business. And clients are certainly now starting to ask for it. I couldn't tell you the number of times people will say, can you also shoot video at the same time? So having that ability is a massive advantage. So don't believe that in the future, people are not going to start asking you to shoot both. In fact, I still believe that the future of cameras is probably to record video and then take stills off that. Now, that's still a little bit away yet, obviously, because you need something like 8K footage to do that, to get acceptable results. But it's possible. I mean, let me just see if I can just find that image that I did. Let me just see if it's in here where I can find it. Let me just go to this folder. Where are we? Oh, I hope I can find it for you because I'd love to just show you what it looks like. I've got so many images in here. I may have got rid of it. Bear with me just a second. Behind the scenes, Haley Prints, test edit. Yeah, I've probably put it somewhere else. Let me just check one more folder to see if I can find it for you. Because it's important. I do think that this is the way the future has to go. Now remember, this was shot with the A9. That's why I want to show it to you. Here we go. All right, so let me open these up for you. Now, these have been edited, all right? So don't think that they haven't been edited, but let me just bring this over here. All right, so these were edited. These were taken off 4K video files, all right? And I edited them, grabbed the still out of the edit, and then I manipulated them in Photoshop. So that's the first one. Let me just open up the next one. So this was a moving one that I'll show you here. This was, I wanted to try and see how it came up with a moving type scenario that was moving fairly fast. And I'll show you the last one. What was that? Oh, my pen. So this is the last one that I did. All right, so these were all taken off the A9. So this is only the A9. And this was shot at 4K. And that's the type of result that you can get if you're dealing with grabbing stills off video. And that's with the A9. Now imagine what you're going to be able to do if it's 8K footage. The problem here is that if you enlarge this, there's not enough resolution to blow this up at this stage because the file sizes aren't large enough. But if you're dealing with having 8K footage, well then it's completely different. Let me just see if I can move this back. It's completely different if you're dealing with 8K footage because then I think you're getting around, I've gone blank about what the file size was. I think it was around about 30 megabytes. It might be a fraction more, I can't remember. Someone may be able to chime in and comment about the file size that's there. But can you imagine if you're dealing with 8K? Now, yes, it's not there yet, but it's only a matter of you think how computers were 5 years ago to what you can handle now. Like my computer can easily handle 4K video footage with multiple layers, multiple corrections, and things like that. So it's not too far down the track where we're going to be able to handle, 6 and 8K footage. Now, when that starts to happen, if you can grab stills off those images, things change completely. And I think as we go on and we're using more things like continuous lighting, Gerald just sent me something today to show me that Godox had released a light that is sort of like what the ProPhoto B10 I use is. And I use that extensively now to light up. You no longer need flash. So it's interesting how this might go in the future. And I do think this is possibly the way of the future. But so let's have a think about it. So at the moment, Sony is holding back, particularly on the video aspect of things. I mean, how long have we been waiting for the a7siii? Or how long have we been waiting for 4K 60? You look at what Nikon have done. Nikon have produced amazing updates in their latest firmware now. You can get amazing bit depths and things like that if you're going out to an external recorder. Fuji have got way better video. Even Canon's video is better than what... It's cropped, yes. So we've got that aspect of it, but even they have better video than what we're getting now in the Sony side of things. So Sony particularly are holding back on the video side of things. So there's either there's a couple of scenarios here that Sony can't possibly do it in the body that they've got, so they're going to have to change the body. And I think if that's the case, Sony have to realize that they have to change the body to enable us to shoot things like 4K 60 and things like that. Or even higher bit depths as well. Or they're just holding back. They're trying to protect their FS line. And if that's the case, they're doing exactly what Canon and Nikon did previously And that's going to hurt them because eventually people are no longer going to say, they're not going to accept it forever. And I think you're already seeing people, like even in the chat today, some were saying they were looking at other camera brands like the Blackmagic camera. Panasonic have got amazing video cameras out now. Yes, you have to manually focus because their autofocus sucks. But what if their next camera comes out and it has phase detection? What if Panasonic did that? What if the Canon EOS-R, and I'm going to talk about that later on, brings out a camera that is no longer crippled? I should have that cripple hammer coming over to whack me over the head. But what if Canon do something like that as well? What if the next EOS-R, and I am going to talk about that in a discussion, comes out and it's an amazing camera with no longer crippled with the crop factor, or it has the dual card slots, and things like that, bigger bit depths. And it's just something interesting that could happen. So the longer Sony take to bring something out, the worse it's getting, because other manufacturers now are starting to add a lot more. Remember, when Sony said they were going to exceed expectations at that time, 4K 60 didn't exist. The high bit depths didn't exist. But now all of those do exist now. So now Sony, if they're going to exceed expectations, have to go further than that. And it's interesting, and I think Sony do have to step up, and I've got a feeling they're going to. I really do believe that it's going to probably happen this year. In fact, I think the A7 IV is going to come out in the coming weeks, and I noticed there was another drop in the A7 IV this morning, Sony Alpha Rumors announced. So it's dropped another couple of $100. So I do believe that we're probably going to see an A7 IV announced reasonably soon. I think Sony have to. If they don't, it's going to start affecting sales. The recent sales figures that I showed you, Nikon had gone over above Sony, and that was due to their new camera that they released. What was it, the Z50? Cheers. I need a drink while I'm discussing this. So they have the Z50, which probably did push Nikon above Sony. I think it's probably the Z50 sales that have probably pushed that. Also, Canon and Nikon had brought in really big discounts over the last couple of months. It probably pushed them above Sony as well. But it's a really interesting discussion. But what I'd love to know here too is, and you can leave it in the comments, I'm going to go to the chat in a minute to see what you guys think, but I'd love to know if you think that Sony now are to the point where they do have to do something. Remember, it can be really bad if they start to rest on their laurels, and that's something we don't want Sony to do. And yeah, anyway, let's open it up to the chat because I'm really curious to know what you guys think. I've got to move that back over, actually. That's what went wrong. Let me just fix that before I go back to the thing. All right, so let's go to the chat to see what you guys are saying, because I'm just curious to know what people are saying about all this. Altric said, I wish I was going. Any chance of you guys going next year? Are you talking about to WPPI? No, definitely not for me, Altric. This will be my probably one visit for the next few years. I'm going to go to Europe next. So the following year, I'll be visiting people in Europe. John said, you're going to talk about Canon rumors. Yes, I am. That's going to be coming in one of the stories as well, John. It's not like the a7S-Rii is going to be optimized for photos. Yeah, and I'll discuss that soon. You may be right, Langston, because that's a good point. Kevin said, you're from Boston, waiting on the A7 IV, can't wait. Gerald said, David and I will be doing the UK EU next year. Yeah, it'll probably be next year for me. Thumbs up, viewers. Number of thumbs up, one less. Yeah, I'd love it if you could give me a thumbs up, guys. It does make a difference. Amazing photos. Thanks so much, Aaron. Is it me, or does pin-up mean something different than what David is talking about? Oh, why? Does it have a different name in the US than what I'm talking about? Pin-up here is that exact type thing. That's what we call it. We call them pin-up shoots. Jamie said some incredible shots. Thank you so much. Dave said, hi, David, I forgot. Am I supposed to leave a thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs up. One could argue there are degrees. I'm not sure what that means. Greg said, very excited about your workshop. Yeah, I can't wait, Greg. It's going to be a great one. It really is. Temperature envy here. Are you going to WPPI? Jim's saying. Oh, he's talking to Jim's going to WPPI, so I can't wait to meet up with Jim. I bet you have some pin-up magazines. Ah, so pin-up means that sort of magazine, does it? Oh, okay. Yeah, pin-up means here, it means that type of 50s, sort of 60s shoot. That's what we term as pin-up. What do you call it then? Just curious to know. Takes the fifth. What else? Hero said, Florida winter was a few days ago, 55. Yeah, I saw in our news this morning, Hero, that you had goannas falling out of the trees. It was quite funny. They were frozen. Gerald says, looking forward to meeting Jim at WPPI. Now, okay, people are starting to talk here. So Sniper V said, been a Sony user since the NX5, the a7 II and the a7R II. And currently a7 III and the a7R III. I'm tempted by Canon's RF glass, but waiting on a better, more complicated, completed EOS-R body. And I'll talk about that new EOS-R rumours as one of the stories later on, Sniper. So stay tuned for that as well. I think Panda uses A77. Yes, he does. Hero says, when's the flippy touchscreen? That's the most important feature that we all want. See, that's another thing too, that Sony have to upgrade. And I've talked about this before with you, that those screens that are on the back of the Sony cameras now, I don't know how long they've been out. I don't think they've changed in 4 years. So it is now getting to the point where it's ridiculous that Sony haven't got a full touch interface on their cameras. I mean, Sony does mobile phones and great interfaces, so there's no excuse. So I can't understand why Sony don't do decent screens and have decent touch interfaces, because if you look at the Nikon Z series cameras, or if you look at the EOS-R cameras, those screens are way better than what my Sony A9 has. Way better. In fact, the GH5 has better screens than what my Sony has, and that's an old camera. Sony have to up their game, that's for sure. That's why Aaron's saying he loves the screen on his camera. Yep, the Panasonics are always great. Photomix says, I think Sony is still being competitive. It just depends on what you want out of your camera. There is no best camera for everything. Sony is still number one in some areas, just not all. Yep. Andre says, if Canon drops the mic, Sony will suffer badly. If Canon won't deliver 4K 60p, they are stupid. They are. And I would expect the next camera to be 4K 60p on the next... And I think that would be the case. I think they would be nuts not to do that. Even the Z50 has a touchy screen. Come on, Sony. And that's okay, folks. It's called competition. Harry said, who thumbed down? Still counts for your analytics, so I don't think they realise that. Brown says, Photomech, but seems more people are stuck to YouTube, care about the video stuff. Yeah, and they do. And like I said, Brown, I think it's becoming a more important issue, particularly amongst younger people. I know a lot of photographers just don't care, but it is going to get to the point where you will have to care, I believe. And remember, if it's not there, you don't have to use it. This is like I keep talking about a fold-up screen or a fold-out screen. If you don't want to use it as a fold-out screen, keep it closed. But at least if that feature is there, it's usable for someone that may need it. It's like people that go out and buy a high-res A7R4. The reason why they like that is for that to have the ability to crop. That's often why they like to have that camera. I know they also want it to have the ultimate resolution for retouching and things like that, but I often hear people that have the A7R4, is they say they love the resolution because it gives them ability to crop. Now, you can still have the A7R4, but never use that feature. It doesn't matter, but it's there if you want to use it. It's the same with having 4K 60. You may never want to use it, but to have that ability to use it is a massive thing if you are shooting video, because remember, like I said, then you can use it for stabilizing your footage, you can use it for cropping and things like that. So, and even grabbing stills and things like that. Jamie says, I'm not sure about this race to more than 4K. The storage requirements for even 4K are huge, let alone for 6K or 8K. Just remember though, Jamie, how long ago was it that we had just 1 gigabyte hard drives. I think you've got to understand how quickly technology changes now with hard drives. I think as time goes on, storage space is not going to be an issue. Like I said, just look back 5 years ago and see what the standard hard disk size was back in those days. You'll be surprised how much it's changed in 5 years. Go back 10 years particularly and you will be amazed at the difference in storage requirements. Technology advances very, very quickly. Photomix says, YouTube is just an echo chamber for people repeating stuff they hear. The world is bigger than YouTube. Yep. Harry said, wait till the end before thumbing down. It gives people false sense of stability. I love it. Jamie says, I guess if you could shoot 8K, then you could take some stills. Yes, you could. And that's the exact thing that you could do, is you can take stills from those videos. Jim Altrick saying he's going to go to WPPI next year. Aaron says, oh my gosh, Ike, you're right. Been saying that for a while. I don't care for over 4K. Better 4K would interest me a lot, like variable and higher frame rates. Bit depths and things like that, yes. And even higher frame rates, yes, I agree. Photomix says, even with Sony's lack of video features, Sony's video is still good enough to compete for the next 5 to 10 years. It's not if you compete against the competition, Ike. People are switching. That's where you've got to be careful. I'm hearing an awful lot of people now who are considering the Fuji for the video. They're considering Panasonic particularly, and also the Blackmagic cameras. I'm not talking about people that are doing stills, but I'm definitely talking about it from the videography perspective. So I disagree on that. I think that people may switch if Sony don't do something reasonably soon. Altrick says, still waiting on how you shoot fusion video. Yeah, I've just never got around to doing that yet. 1080p is still king as much as you all want 4K 60. 1080, 120 is still king. Yeah, that may be how you think. I don't agree. I think a lot of people now shoot in 4K and then downsample to 1080p. If you've got the A6 400 or the A6 600, you get a much better result shooting in 4K. Much better result. So I disagree a bit there. But we all want different things, so... what else? Aaron says, you may be right, Ike, but to sell more, they need to keep up with the rest and not fall far behind in the video department. What else? Langston says, I'm just going to sit over here and not say anything. Why? I love it. Oh, okay. So 8K gives you 33 megapixels. So yes, just imagine if you had an 8K camera, you get a 33 megapixel still. That's incredible. David is correct, though. Having that 8K vid is the new way to get photos. Yes, in terms of spec sheet comparisons, Sony will need to introduce more for the kids who like to compare numbers. But in reality, the a7 III will service us well into 2025. Aaron says, yes, true. But you say that, Ike, but are you planning on getting another camera? I'm just curious to know whether you say that. Now, you're talking for others or you're talking for yourself. Remember, the thing here is that all of us, probably who are on this channel now, love the technology. And that's the issue with this. And we all have gas. We always want to, say, get newer cameras and things like that. And it's interesting. So I think that if Sony don't innovate and have new features, people who do want those innovations will potentially switch, and that becomes a problem. And I'd love to know your opinion down below too, what you think about this, because everyone's entitled to their opinion, and Ike obviously has one as well. And I don't agree with what everyone always says. I don't agree with what Ike's saying here, but we're allowed to have different opinions. So, you know, I think if Sony do hold back, that it's going to hurt them, but... the EOS-R kills the Sony, and I'm a Sony shooter. I don't know. I don't think it kills it. I think it depends on what you're talking about. Body-wise, there's a few things like the crop factor hurts it, but it does have some better video features, but it hasn't got IBIS, and it also hasn't got dual card slots, so that's one issue. But I'm going to talk about the new EOS-R shortly, Johnny. The question is, the workflow for 8K worth it? It probably isn't yet, Langston, but it might be in another 5 years. We don't know. That's the issue. The The other point that I wanted to make as well to you is this, and I'd like you to think about this, that when I now look back, I've been in video a long time, and I used to have the old UHS videos and beta video cameras. Now when I look back at those videos, I look back at them and I put them on my large television and the quality looks absolutely crap. Now I want you to think about this, all right? The quality looks terrible. It really does. It looks awful compared to what it did then. Now at the time, when I filmed those images and I was watching it on the screens of that day, those images look wonderful. I thought they were fantastic and I thought they would last me forever. They still do for memories, but quality-wise now when I look at them, they look terrible. You just try and download or even have a look at something like, I know that the funny US shows that used to be out there like Maxwell Smart, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, all those programs that were done on the old systems, you have a look at the quality of those now and they look terrible when you look at them on high-res displays from today. Now, what I want you to think about is that, yes, you can shoot 1080p now, all right? And that's quite acceptable for now. But if you're shooting your home movies and you want to look at those home movies like I've done that were shot 10 years ago or 15 years ago, in 15 years' time, when there's 8K displays that are now commonplace out there, that everyone is now used to that, you're going to regret not having the ability that you've saved those files in the highest format that you can at this time, and that's 4K. And this is why I want you to start thinking about that it future-proofs the files quite substantially for the future. And that's one thing I want you to understand, that if you're, say, shooting home movies, something you wanted to keep for the rest of your life, the higher resolution you have, the better that will be. That's one reason why the A7R4 is such a wonderful camera, because you are future-proofing those files for the future, that you've got much more resolution there if you may need that to view on screens in the future. An A9 in the future may not be enough to look on a TV screen. It might look terrible on a future TV screen. And this is just what I'd like you to think about. So don't just say that 1080p is enough. It may be for now, but what about the future? What about the movies that you want to play? What about your family stuff that you want to save for the future? What about even something that you want to save for a client that they can use in a few years' time and is still going to look good? Anyway, it's just something to think about. Alexander says, if you haven't used a proper cinema camera, saying that the A7 III is good enough means nothing. You have nothing to compare it against. And you're probably not going to be able to shoot 8K anytime soon. I agree with you, Ike, but you don't know within 5 years what will be available. Like I said, I couldn't edit 4K 5 years ago. There's no way I could have edited it 5 years ago. It just wasn't possible. I could only get it in that when I bought the Mac Pro that I had. That was the only computer at the time that was able to do that effectively. At 5 years ago, if you go back, there's no way you could have edited it properly. But you don't know what's going to happen in another 5 years. And I agree, probably usable 8K is only 10 years away. I agree. It may be less than that. We don't know. Where were we? Oops, just jumped down a bit. Oh, you call it rockabilly, do you? That's interesting. I'm just going to have to go from here because we're going to be too long on this. We're getting to the point of ridiculousness. I think everybody's lost sight of photography and all we do is talk about gear. You can either shoot a damn camera or you can't. Nobody is going, was doing this 50 years ago. Guy with the camera said, I'm all for the really using 4K like the SH1 rather than 6K, 8K. 4K with full frame 4K with a 1.5 crop, 4K with a 2 times crop, variable frame rates and log profiles and 10 bits internal. Gerald said, yes, in my humble opinion, Sony has to step up their hybrid shooters or lose the new generation of shooters. I hope they do. I'm sure they will, Gerald. I mean, I'm sure Sony are going to bring out something. Waiting for the A7S3 or the A7S4, whatever they call it. Hero says, yes, it's pin up here too. So, yeah, so there's a couple of different things we call it. Jim said, I think Sony must always pause, review, and look for the next leap. I think they need to hear the menu complaints and respond with innovation. And who knows what Sony's going to do, though. Like I said, they may bring out an a7 III update, so an a7 IV, that is good as when the a7 III was released, so it is as advanced as what that was at the time. They may do that with the a7 IV. We don't know. Sony might potentially blow everyone out of the water with an a7 IV. And I hope that I'll be so happy if they do. And it wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't. So we don't know what Sony's going to do. We're just talking about whether we think they should innovate more. Langston saying no, he's been cheeky. Oh, okay. Mark said, do you buy into the theory Sony is trying to protect their F-series of video cameras? Well, if they didn't bring out anything for much longer, I would probably start to believe that, Mark. But at this stage, I'm still giving Sony the benefit of the doubt. But if they don't bring out something soon, yeah, who knows? Maybe the other term for pin-up is rockabilly that you're saying. Alexander said, my computer handles 6K uncompressed RAW, better than 8-bit 4K Sony footage. Interesting. What are you using, Alexander? Just curious. Let me keep going down here. Jim says, why wait on the a7S III when one can spend US $11 on the 6K video cam? Yeah, good point, Jim. I mean, if you've got the money, the only thing for me is it's too big to lug around. I don't want to lug around that heavier camera anymore, but I'm sure if you're a full-on videographer, you would. But I think Sony's thinking, well, they may not be thinking at all about this at this stage, but I think the perfect scenario is to have an a7S III as a B camera to the FS series. I don't think they'll take sales away from one another, and I've discussed this with you all before because I think that with the FS7 series, if someone is going to be doing a professional job, they're definitely going to be buying an FS7. There's no way you're going to go to a high-end video client with a digital SLR. It's just not going to happen at this stage. So you would always be using an FS7, but if you wanted to do some B cam footage, an FS camera and a A7S4 or whatever, 3, whatever you want to call it, would be an amazing B cam, particularly if they have the same color science. Like if they put Venice on both cameras and both cameras would color match one another, videographers would buy both. Because they always need B cameras. They can never just use one camera. They're going to have other cameras with them all the time. So I think, shush Siri, I think one camera would play off the other and they would sell them concurrently. So I don't think that anyone that's going to be buying the A7S series is not going to go out and buy the FS7 series, for instance, or the FS9. They're going to buy that anyway.
I didn't catch that.
Siri, shush. If they need those high-end cameras, they're going to buy the high-end cameras. They need that for the ability to put the hard drives into the camera. They need that for the ability to add the XLR cameras that they use. All these sorts of things that the high-end videographers use. So I don't think they can compete with one another. I think they're different uses, but they could be used together in tandem if that makes sense. Longrider said, the kicker is Sony makes the sensors for Fuji, Nikon and Fuji. Yeah, and that's why they're in such a winning position, aren't they? I mean, the sensor division is such an amazing division that Sony are going to make a lot of money off that aspect of it. But remember, now they're totally different divisions, and that's something we have to remember now. They did separate the sensor division from the camera division. Will Sony release 4K 60? They've got to eventually, that's for sure. John said, hi David, 2020-21 releases Nikon Z8, Z9, Canon R Mark II, the RZ, Panasonic S series and TOF, I'm not sure what that means, Sony A9 III. I don't think the A9 III will come out for a while yet though. John said, better to have than not. Exactly. Like I said, if you don't need to use it, you don't need to use it. Ariel says, I'm already up to 16 terabyte drives. The Leica M10 monochrome just released last week and very expensive, but worth it. None of digital mirrorless cameras even get close to the quality of images. My first PC had a huge 4 gigabyte. I think my first PC had 128 megabytes or something like. It was ridiculous. It was that small a number. Might even been 40. My first one, like it was just crazy. And that was so expensive. I can remember that. Pema says features is great for mirrorless, but with images quality, it doesn't get close to the Leica. I haven't really looked at that camera, so I can't comment on it. Lee said I shoot everything. G'day, Lee. Lee said I shoot everything in 4K. We have had the tech for years. There's no reason not to. And like I said, I agree with you, Lee. Welcome in the group too. Because the thing is that you've got that ability also for future-proofing those files. And like I said, I wouldn't underestimate that. And like I said, just go back and look at some old footage of stuff that was done 5 to 10 years ago, and just look at it now and it looks terrible. And that's one argument I can throw at you. And like I said, the thing is too, the footage is always better if you shoot in 4K. And even if you're going to do it to 1080, shoot in 4K and downsample. Put it on a 1080 timeline. And that will give you a much better result. In fact, YouTube particularly, if you are into YouTube's quality looks way better if you upload into 4K. Because their compression algorithms that they use, there's less compression put on the file if you shoot in 4K than there is if it's 1080p. Raymond says, my 135 and 24 GM are still orphan. Oh, you still haven't got a camera yet. Oh, no. Langston said, 99% of YouTubers I shoot for who get millions of views don't shoot over 1080p. Meanwhile, the cinematographer and photographers shoot higher. Brian said Sony video sucks. It doesn't, Brian. Sony's video is actually very good. I mean, I have to say that the video quality is amazing. And I think even the 1080p footage of, say, the A9 and the a7 III that I've got, the video footage in 1080 is lovely and it's beautiful. 4K is definitely better, though. It's definitely crisper and sharper and much better looking than what 1080p footage is. And the thing that you can't discount with the Sonys is the autofocus. There's nothing can match the autofocus of what the Sony cameras have. But what it lacks is bit depth. It lacks bit depth. It lacks 10-bit footage. Even now, some cameras are starting to offer 12-bit, I believe. It's lacking 4K 60, so there's video sides of features that are missing. Stan said 4K gives 8 megapixel. 6K gives 18 megapixel and 8K gives 33 megapixel stills. I spent too much to switch again. There's no way I'm switching again, guys. I mean, there's no way. Oh, if Sony don't do something, I mean, I may eventually buy a Canon. That's probably what I would buy. And I'll talk about that when we get the new EOS-R coming up. But if Sony brings out the camera that meets my needs, I'm going to buy that. But there's no way I'm going to switch again. It costs too much money. I've already switched from Nikon to Sony, and I'm not going to do that again. I lost money on that switch. There's no way I'm going to switch again. I'm staying with Sony. I love Sony. But, you know, we can have these discussions. I'm not just going to drink the Kool-Aid and say everything is fantastic when it's not on the video side. Like I said, I like to be honest and have an honest discussion with you guys. Stan said, is it even possible to take photos while recording on Sony cameras? Do you mean take photos while you're recording video? Is that what you're saying? You just grab the still from the video, if that's what you mean. You take it out in post. Where were we? Langston says, I'm never going to care. 90% of Netflix originals are shot in 4K, but I don't even notice that the West Wing isn't even letterboxed. Langston also says, counterpoint, the res of those old shows really doesn't matter because of the creative content and emotional connection. How's record 4K and export scale up to 6K to have longer live time view? Einderbrand says, if you are correct in 5 years, 8K workflow should be the norm. The advancement in cell phones will be close enough that hybrid cameras will be on the decline. Yeah, maybe. I agree. I bought the original EOS 10D for that reason. It was the first 6 megapixel camera in 2000, and I still have those beautiful images today. Jason said, I think influencers, YouTubers are guilty of almost brainwashing people with gas into the I need something and so mentality. Everyone wants all the buzzword features, but do they actually need them? Well, I do need Jason, I do need 4K 60, and I'll explain why. I shoot in 4K all the time for the reasons that I've mentioned. I like to shoot in 4K to get the ultimate quality. Now, if I want to, say, give brides a slow motion version of that, it's not possible. I can't shoot in 4K because you need 4K 60 to be able to slow that image down to 4K 30, for instance, to get that lovely slow motion that brides adore. So it's not possible on a Sony camera. I have to shoot in 1080p. Now, I don't like to do that because it costs me quality. If I'm shooting with multiple cameras and I want to use my a6-400, the a6-400 and the a6-600 particularly are soft if you shoot in 1080p. Do the test yourself. Shoot in 4K, look at the footage, shoot in 1080p, and see the difference. The 4K footage is much better than what the 1080p footage is. So if I want to give my clients the best quality footage that I can give them, and that's what I'm about, is I need to be shooting in 4K. I can't do that with weddings because I need to slow it down. But that's me, Jason. Not everyone wants to do that for their customers, and that's fine. Photomix says, my point is that Sony's 4K video quality is good and looks great if you are shooting for clients day in, day out. Sony's current video specs will still be usable in 2025. Yeah, the higher bitrate is nice and 4K 60 is awesome, but for most typical projects, Sony's current video specs will still be usable in 2025. I know Max will still be overpriced in 5 years. I love it. Within 5 years, most mobile phones will shoot 8K or more. Yep. I'm just going to scroll down a bit because we're never going to get through all this. We're going to be here all day because we're already on 1 hour and we're already on the first story. Let me just see if anyone else has highlighted my name. Tony said, how is it that Sony makes the sensors of other marks without rolling shutter like Fuji, and the new a6-600 and the rest have it bad? I'm pretty sure that the X-T3 has rolling shutter, Tony. I don't think that's true. What else have we got? That's about it. All right, let's go into the next story because we've been here all day. People are going to tell me off again, guys. They're going to say I've been here too long. What are we? 1:02:40. All right, next story. I'm in trouble. I just wanted to talk about this because this was also featured in the Sony Alpha rumors. And they said, this is what Sony said about the future of the a7S III. So we're going to look at that now. Let me just put down here that just where we're up to. So they're saying that they're saying this is what it'll have. 4K 60 and 10-bit 422 and exceed expectations. I'm still wondering how they're going to exceed expectations if that's all they're going to give, because it doesn't really. So it's interesting what they're saying in that regard now. But they're saying down here, this is what the Sony a7S III will have according to Sony. Definitely at least 4K 60, 10-bit 422. Some features will go beyond expectations, and that may be something like a rolling, the different sensors. Say they could have global shutter in there. We don't know, but there's going to have to be something. It could also be 4K 120. We don't know, but they're going to have something that they're going to exceed that expectation that's there. And of course, more battery power, increased AF accuracy, and many more things. I think that they're saying here too that there is a prototype camera recorder that does 4K 120. So they're saying that. The prototype camera was much thicker and had a cooling vent. So it's sort of gone the way of the Panasonic SH1. And that makes sense to me because I think heat is the thing that's stopping this camera from being released. So it does make sense to me that that's the case. The same kind of A9 improvements, the AF build quality, weather sealing. So I think what they're saying in here that the Sony a7S III is going to have a larger body. I think it will have similar tactile controls to what the a7R4 has and the A9 II has. It's going to have those same buttons, the same type of weather sealing, etc., but in a larger body. because I think they have to do something in a larger body to get that heat out. And if you look at it, what they were talking about there was to have, say, a fan on board, and it would drag the heat out of the camera. And I think that's probably the case of what they may have to do. And like I said, I would still be happy if they just gave 4K 60 and we had it for, 3 minutes. I'd be happy with that because I could still shoot with that. Most of my shooting is only around 10 seconds. Or even less than that. So, that would keep me completely happy. So it's interesting to see what they do. And I think 10-bit 422 also is something that I'm hoping is internal, but they may give us that external. We just don't know yet what they're going to do in that regard. But clearly, the better AF system is going to be built in it. If you look at the A7S II, that will be a massive jump up from that, what you've got. If you get the A9 tracking that's in there, it may even be slightly better now because it's a newer camera. The sensor could be completely different. Sony may go global shutter or something like that, and basically then blow everyone out of the water because they bring out a completely different system that's going to eliminate rolling shutter and all things like that. So, that could be amazing. We don't know what megapixel the camera's going to have at this stage. There's sort of been rumours anywhere from the 12 up to 16, up to 18, up to 24, I've heard. It just depends on what type of file size they want for their 4K footage and things like that, or if it's 6K downsampled, or whether it's 6K footage. So we still have to wait to see what we get in that regard. But, let's hope. I think the A7 IV is going to come out first. I think the A7 IV is probably going to be announced in the coming weeks. I'm hoping it's why I'm in the States at WPPI. So I'm hoping that's the case. And then I think the A7S is going to come out mid-year. The new A7S will come out mid-year, probably around NAB, whenever that is. I'm not sure when NAB is, but I think that's probably the place that the A7S, the new A7S camera will be released. Due to the fact that that's a video show, it makes much more sense to have that released at NAB than, say, an A7 IV would be released. That's perfect to release at WPPI, and also that photo show is in at Japan at the same time. I can't remember what that name was. It's a big one in Japan, but that could be the time when the A7 IV is released. I'm going to keep going anyway, so let's go on to the next one, which is the Canon. We'll come back to Q&A a little bit at the end. All right, so the Canon. I wanted to talk about this. Let me just move this over so we can see all of this. So this is just a rumor that there's going to be 3 new full-frame EOS-R cameras coming out in 2020. So this is on Canon Rumors, and I thought I'd share this because it matches what we were talking about at the beginning of today's sort of live. But if you're looking at it down through here, they're saying that there's going to be 3 of them, and I'll talk about the specs in a minute of what the Canon EOS-R Mark II is going to possibly have. But they're saying in here that this is going to be a big year for Canon. According to the latest rumours and reports from reliable sources, excuse me, I'm burping from beer. The company is planning to release not 1, not 2, but 3 new full-frame mirrorless EOS-R cameras in 2020, including the even cheaper entry-level camera for $1,000 than the $1,000 EOS-R-P. The latest info comes from Canon Rumors, who has pieced together a 2020 roadmap, mirrorless roadmap for Canon using different sources. And they're saying in here that, yet again, there is a high-resolution EOS-R camera, and that's the one we've been talking about that's meant to be the 70-odd megapixel beast of a camera that's meant to be coming out late next year, I believe. But that's just the beginning. They're saying here that according to Canon, to the Canon Rumors, Canon will also release 2 EOS-R cameras before the year is over. One will be an entry-level EOS-R-M, so it's going to be a low-level EOS-R, and there'll be an even cheaper EOS-R-P, which currently sells at a rock-bottom price of just $1,000 for the full-frame mirrorless cameras. Now, this is the interesting thing, because they're saying here that, but it may be an EOS-R Mark II, or it may be a sports speed body, perhaps with a lower megapixel sensor aimed at the Sony a7S line of cameras. So are they going to tackle the Sony a7S series cameras with an EOS-R camera? And it's interesting. So I'll put all these links down below so you can have a look at this. But let's look at the Canon rumors that they're saying for the EOS-R too. So what they're saying is that it's going to be a 32 megapixel sensor. Now, a lot of people are saying with the A7 IV, that there's rumours now that they're going to keep the same sensor. I hope that's not the case. I do hope there's a little bit of a bump in megapixels. But they're saying here that the Canon EOS-Rii is 32 megapixels. It's going to have IBIS, and that's one thing that was really missing, or sadly missing from their last EOS-R. It's going to have the new Digic X. They're saying it's going to be a different version than the 1DS Mark II. I'm not sure what that means, but it's going to be a different one. 12 frames per second, ISO 100 to 51-200. That would be the standard ISO. It's going to have one SD card slot, and it will have one CF Express card slot, which is amazing. So that's one thing that's really lacking. So they really have fixed two things here particularly. They've got IBIS on the camera, and they've also added another card slot, which is one thing I was really critical with them about with their previous cameras. No crop 4K video with PDAF. They're not saying what resolution that is, but they're saying it will be a no crop 4K this time. No raw video though. It'll probably be that 5.6 million .EVF and may get a new naming scheme. So they're the rumours that they're talking about. Now, that's a pretty good spec if they're talking about that. I'm hoping that that would also be 4K 60. If that's 4K 60 and those specs are true, that is really going to be an interesting camera. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what that is, actually. We're going to keep going because I want to go up to the latest news. I'm going to come back to Q&A, guys, so we can talk about some stuff quickly. Let me know what you think about that camera in the chat below, because I'd love to know what you think about that. Does that excite you at all, or you just think, blah, they'll probably Canon cripple it? Just in news, I just wanted to share this. There's a Canon RF 85mm 1.2. I'm hoping Sony brings out an 85 1.2. I also noticed that Canon, there's rumours they're going to bring out a 135 f1.4. That thing is going to be honking in the lens department, but Canon are doing really good stuff with their lenses, and I'd love Sony. I would not be surprised if Sony bring out an 85 1.2 eventually, and I would be so excited if Sony did that. That would be one lens that I'd love, because I've always been envious of the Canon 85 1.2. The reviews of this lens are outstanding, so have a read of it. I'd love to know what you think about it anyway. Let me know in the comment box down below. I'll stick that all down below. Another rumour here as well is that Sony will definitely announce another wide-angle lens, and I've been asking for this for a long time. I would love Sony to release something like a 12mm or, you know, say even a 12 or a 14mm wide-angle 2.8 lens, or a 1.4 would be incredible. I'd love that, and I'm really hoping that Sony do that, because I do love shooting with primes, and that would really fit in well. If I could sort of match that up with my 24 GM and have, say, a wide-angle 12mm that had great autofocus and was 1.4, that would be like the ultimate lens to me. So I'm really hoping that they bring out a 12 or a 14mm. Let me know in the comments down below what you would like to see released in a wide-angle lens. I know they have zoom lenses that do 12, but I'd love a fast prime, and it's really one of the only things that's lacking. I also noticed that there's a rumour also of a 300mm lens as well, prime, and I think that was, I can't remember whether it was a 2.8 or something else, I can't remember, but for the Olympics. So Sony may also be releasing one more larger lens for the Olympics, so stay tuned for that. And the last story that we're going to look at for news before we open up to Q&A for a few minutes is this mirrorless lens shootout. And I'll leave this link down below because it's very interesting. I'd like you all to read it. They compare multiple lenses. The Canon 2470, it's got the Sony GM, the 2470, the Sigma 2470. I think there's a Leica one, and I'm not sure what the other one, what was the other one? I'm just trying to see what it was. Canon. Yeah, there's Canon, Panasonic as well is the other one that's in there. Looking at all the discussion of these lenses, apart from the interesting one was, I think the Leica Panasonic one was the sharpest or best overall lens overall. But the next best lens out of this whole system was the Sigma 2470. So that lens particularly, if you're after a 24-70 lens that is superb across the whole focal range, that's sharp right across the frame, I think you can't go wrong with the Sigma 24-70 if you don't mind carrying the weight. I still would prefer to have my Tamron, but they're 28-75, but that's because I love that weight factor. And if I need to go wider than that, I've got the G Master 24. But if you are after a 24-70, it's clear that that is probably the best lens that's out there. Apart from that Panasonic, which we can't use on the Sonys anyway if you want autofocus. So it's interesting. So have a read of that article and let me know what you think down below. But it looks like the Sigma particularly is an amazing lens. It sort of points out too that I do believe that the Sony will probably update the 24-70 sooner or later to a version 2. The same with the 70-200. I think that you'll find once Sigma releases 70-200, you're probably going to find that the Sigma lens is going to beat the G Master 70-200. So I think what you'll find in the coming months or next year or so, I wouldn't be surprised to see Sony release a Mark II of the 24-70 and the 70-200. Let me know what you think about that. So let's open it up to Q&A. What are we? 1:16. I'm going to get abused again for having such long shows. I always get people abusing me. Okay, so let's have a little chat. And I'll have a drink while we're doing it. Fatamik said, shoots video in 10-bit 4K RAW with the latest lenses and best tech for the sharpest ultimate video quality. XT3 has rolling shutter. Yes, it has. That's why I said that. It has, Aaron. You're exactly correct. The interesting thing, though, too, is, Ike, and I'll tell you this for fact, that if I use my iPad an awful lot, if I shoot in 1080p and I look at it on my iPad full screen, it doesn't look very good. It actually looks pretty bad. Particularly if I've shot it on YouTube and I watch a YouTube clip. If it's 1080p, it looks awful. If I watch a 4K video on my iPad, I've got the 12-inch iPad. If you watch that full screen, boy, does 4K make a big difference on something like an iPad screen. It makes a massive difference. 1080p looks pretty ordinary. So it matters if you're watching something like on an iPad with those high-density screens. Jim said, he's just saying what story we're up to. Robert said, Eric, when you're coming to Bermuda to shoot. What else have we got? Robert says, what is his or her names? I'm not sure what that means. Guy with the camera said, anything half decent from Canon will cost $3,500. Yeah, it's not going to be cheap. You're right. Exactly. It'll be expensive. Drunk content is the best content. I love it. Canon's strategy is so strange. Cheaper and cheaper bodies, but the world's most expensive lust-worthy glass. Yeah, the glass is expensive, but boy, it's good. You have to give it to Canon on the lens side of things. Guy with the camera said, take a look at the M6 II, a late-gen 4K camera from Canon. It has 3K upsampled to 4K. I suspect Canon to play those games. Yeah, I hope they don't do something like that, like really, cripple it. That's exactly right. Casper said, Sony has got all the money to smack them all down. Torben says, hoping for a bump up in megapixels for the A7 IV. What happened to the 24 megapixel being the sweet spot? Yeah, I agree. Now, I do love 24 megapixels, and I'm hoping that Sony give you the ability to shoot down on that. But what I'm saying is I'm hoping for others that constantly ask for that can't afford an A7 III, Torben. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm happy to just shoot with 24 for what I do, but I know a lot of people can't afford an A7R4 or an A7 III. So I'm hoping for their case that it'll be a mini blown down version of the A7R4. I'm quite happy with 24 megapixels, and I should have stated that there. Jim said, good night, have a good show. Thanks, Jim. He's off to bed. Guy with the camera said, I'm good with the 24 megapixel, good for balanced stills and video. Brian says Canon is the best. John said the R2 should have damn good stills camera. Decent video will be a plus. Guy with the camera said the Canon 135 f1.4 patent has it at 180mm, double the length of the current 135. It's going to be a monster lens, that one, that's for sure. 7cm more, yep. It is. It's going to be huge. It's not one I'd want to lug around. I lugged around the 105 f1.4, and that was massive. Sony 40mm 1.8. I'd love a 12 if I could have a choice, Andre. If I could have any choice of a wide angle, I'd love a 12mm. But, you know, I would adore to have something like that in weddings. I love the 24GM for both general use and astro, but I'd like to take a look at a prime around 12 or so. Yep, me too. 12 to 24 DX was a gem. John, I like the Sigma 35 1.2. Sigma makes great lenses. They all make great lenses now. Andre said Sony will exceed expectations by releasing the a7S with an RF mount. That's funny. George said, and it's interesting, Jason, I sort of agree with you, that I've never used a lens that's as good as the Sony 24GM. That lens is... I mean, they have done some serious voodoo on this lens. For the size of this lens as a 67mm filter thread, 1.4, this lens is ridiculous. I've never used a lens that I can say I'm more happier than this. This and the 135. Sony make incredible lenses. When they do it right, Sony make unbelievable lenses. And they've done it incredibly well with these two lenses, that's for sure. And just think what their new 70-200 will be, or what their new 24-7 will be. If they put the linear motors of the 135 in those lenses, wow. It's going to be fantastic. Gerald said, you know, I got the Sigma Art 2470 2.8 and the Sony Alpha blog test showed it was the only E-mount one that range that could fully resolve the 61 files on the A7R4. Aldrich said, I'm waiting on the Sigma 70-200. Yep, shouldn't be too long. I'm still waiting on the Tamron 70-180. I'd love to have that to take to the US, but I don't think it's going to be released. Sony future-proofed those lenses, so no doubt there will be a version 2. So I doubt there will be a version 2. I think there will be, MJ. I think they're being beaten now by Sigma. So I think that there'll have to be a new version. When you look at the cost difference between the Sigma and the Sony, it's, what is it, about $1,000 or some ridiculous figure? I think there'll have to be a version 2. I think there'll be a version 2 because they will want the linear focus motors in there. I think it's... Look, Nikon have done it. Canon have done it. I think there will definitely be updates of those lenses. Gerald said, the Sony 2470 2.8 could not fully resolve the 61 megapixel files of the A7R4. The Sigma 24-7 2.8 could. So not all GM lenses are future-proof in reality. Yep. I'd be in the market for a 12 to 14 1.4 GM. Me too, I'd love it, particularly a 12 one. I have the 16 to 35 and the 24 GMs, but like the wider prime for astrophotography. Photomix says the 2470 2.8 is probably the sharpest zoom he's ever used. Mark said, Nikon shooter here, D850 and Z7, contemplating where to go next. Wait on Nikon to fit autofocus or go to Sony, but will depend on the a7S III specs. How painful was your switch? Wasn't too bad, Mark. I mean, I didn't lose too much. The problem is, I suppose, the longer you wait, the more you may lose. So sooner or later, you have to make a decision on which way to jump. The main reason I switched over was at the time, Sony never had a camera that could do Nikon didn't have a camera that could do video that well. And I wanted to move to mirrorless, and they had nothing available at that time. I don't regret moving to Sony one little bit. There is a cost involved, and only you can work out whether you think that's justified. But I'm certainly happy that I made the switch. But I would wait and see just what Sony release in the coming weeks. Casper said the Sony 72GM lens is a fantastic lens and the only lens you need. Yep, I know you love that, Casper. The Z lenses are a big reason I love the Z6. I think there will be updates, but not for a few years. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they come sooner than you think, MJ, but we're going to have to wait and see. Photomix says, I'm not one of those where the digital SLR is dead, folks, but the new mirrorless lenses from Nikon and Canon are leading, and the big reason to switch to mirrorless. There was a review on that, Casper, about the 2470. What about the Zeiss 18? It's not wide enough for me, Alex. That's a good lens, but I'd like a 12mm. I'd love a 12mm 1.4 or a 14 1.4. That would be perfect for what I shoot. Guy with the camera said, I read the articles by Roger Lens Rental, and he was implying that the 2470 and 7200 were basically recycled Sony A designs. That would explain why they run run in the mill compared to late. They definitely are suffering. If you look at the reviews, read that article that I've got here. Have a read of that article. If you look at the serious reviews that are out there, the Sigma it definitely beats the Sony 2470. Gerald says, I love my 70-200 GM, but I've hardly touched it since I got the 135. I've hardly touched my 70-200 either, Gerald. And there we go, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. We had big discussions. Please, if you could you give us a thumbs up? I would really appreciate that. And obviously share it. It gets me around as I'm unsponsored. Any questions, leave down below, and I do always answer the questions. I do always read them, and I'll always give a love heart or something like that as well, but I usually answer something that's there to make sure you know I've read it. So please leave any questions down below. Stay tuned for some other videos coming up soon. Don't forget to, if you do want to attend that workshop that I'm doing, there's only 4 spots left out of the 8. So I'd love to see you attend, and I'll put the link. You just email me at this stage. I haven't advertised it. Once I advertise it, there'll be a link. But if you do want to attend that workshop with me on Sunday the 29th, the pin-up one with Rebecca, just contact me by email and I'll get back to you. Apart from that, guys, thank you so much. And I'll see you all in the next show. Bye for now.